Hello, everybody. I'm back. It's been so long since I last saw you. Thanks for joining me. We're just going to wait a few minutes until 8:15, and then we'll get started. But I have a story. All right, we have 13 people. Fun times. Let's not completely spam the chat. If you guys have something valid and something that will contribute to the chat, then type it, but don't just continue spamming. Yeah, because then valid questions get the valid questions get drowned by all the crazy things. And also just a reminder, no swearing in the chat. That now's not the time to be swearing in the chat. But yes, okay. We'll start in a few minutes. How are you guys? Do you guys find World War I interesting? How much do you guys know about World War I? Do you know a lot or not super much? Okay, hi Friedman. Thanks for getting online, yeah. Okay, Calvertinos knows more about World War II. Okay, that's valid. I actually knew more about World War II as well. Growing up in America, you don't really learn too much about World War I because America only joined in 1917. But then I ended up learning a lot about World War I. Yeah. Were cadets ever sent to a war before? No. Originally, 1 West Montreal Squadron was formed in 1941 to be a training center for future airmen in the Royal Canadian Air Force. So it was a bit different. Obviously, now that's not the case. That's not what Air Cadets is for now. But originally, that was the purpose. So a lot of cadets in World War II at 1 West would be cadets, and then they would get sent to war. After they had left cadets, they would join the Air Force and then go off. Toxic gas. Yeah, we're going to be discussing that. Yeah, we're going to definitely talk about toxic gas. That was the first use of toxic gas as a weapon was in World War I. All right, I am going to get started. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about one man. And obviously World War I involved millions of men. So this is just going to be looking at World War I through one person's eyes. So George Cecil Carvell. That's the man we're talking about. He was born in 1882 in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. His uncle was a senator. So his family was fairly well off, fairly prominent in the Charlottetown scene. His uncle later became the lieutenant governor of Prince Edward Island when George was quite young. So he lived in Charlottetown. His uncle was in the lieutenant governor's palace. Things were pretty good. But his mother died when he was only 9. And they were living in Toronto at the time, so they moved around a bit. George was a bit of an adventurer, and you'll see this throughout this story. He was an adventurer. In 1899, when he was 17 years old, he leaves Canada and goes to South Africa to fight for the British Army in the Second Boer War. And the Second Boer War is basically a war between the British and the Dutch over who would be in control of South Africa. It was a colonial war between two colonizing powers fighting over who would have South Africa. But anyway, that war happened between 1899 and 1902. Boer. Oh, I see the comment. Bolotsky, that's a good question. I'm going to type how it is. The Second Boer. If you want clarification on something, just comment like Bolotsky just did, and I'll clarify for you. But that's what it is. So if you're interested in the Second Boer War, you can look it up after the video. But he was there, and he served from 1899 to 1902. And then after the war ended, the British won, and so they got to keep South Africa as a colony. And the British government gave him a plot of land, and so he was able to stay in South Africa. He didn't immediately move back to Canada. He stayed in South Africa and ended up being a manager at a gold mine in South Africa. And the people in that gold mine were mostly Chinese. And so while George Carvell was managing this gold mine, he learned Mandarin. That will prove helpful later. And you'll see where Mandarin comes in later on in this story. But it's a strange story. It's a strange story. He's a Canadian fighting for the British in South Africa, stays in South Africa, and learns Mandarin. So that's what we're at right now. And yes, thank you, Sergeant Friedman, for clarifying a Boer is a Dutch settler in South Africa. That's a very good clarification. So it's the British fighting the Boers, the Dutch settlers in South Africa. But we're focusing mainly on World War I today, which is why I'm not going too in-depth on the Second Boer War. Anyway, yes, multicultural man, doing a lot of different things. So he's in South Africa, learning Mandarin, managing this gold mine. And he eventually moves back to Canada, but not until later, probably around 1910-ish. And 1914, First World War hits, and because Canada is part of the British Empire, it automatically gets dragged into the First World War with Britain. But George was kind of old at the time. He was 32 years old in 1914, which is a bit older than what normally the government wanted for their soldiers. They usually wanted like 19, 20-year-olds. That first batch of people that the government wanted to recruit was the like 19, 20, 21-year-olds. But there is a unit in Canada called the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, which is still around. It is an infantry unit. And George Carvell knew the founder of the unit. Okay, I'm seeing all the comments. Yes, 32 is not old. 32 is just old for the Canadian military trying to send people overseas. Anyway, there was a new military regiment forming called the PPCLI. I typed it in the chat. The Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. And George met the founder. They were fighting in the same unit together in South Africa in the Boer War. So he had connections. he ended up joining the PPCLI. And I believed he joined as a junior officer. And his attestation date is August 24th, 1914. So he joined in the beginning of the war. And he was a lieutenant in this regiment. And in the 22nd of April, 1915, George Carvell was sent to Belgium with his unit and became involved in the Second Battle of Ypres. And so that is what was going on 105 years ago today. The Second Battle of Ypres was fought in Ypres in Western Belgium. It's mostly famous now for the first use of poisonous gas by the Germans in the First World War. So nobody knew what poison gas was. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew how to react, pretty much. I'm just pulling up my notes I wanted to put up some quotes. On kind of what it was like in the Second Battle of Ypres. Here we go. Okay. So first, the Germans gassed the French. And people ended up trying to pee on bandanas and put bandanas around themselves to try and escape the gas. And here's a quote from somebody who was there. Dusk was falling when from the German trenches in front of the French line rose a strange green cloud of death. The light northeasterly breeze wafted it toward them, and in a moment death had them by the throat. One cannot blame them that they broke and fled. In the gathering dark of that awful night, they fought with the terror, running blindly in the gas cloud and dropping with chests heaving in agony and the slow poison of suffocation mantling their dark faces. Hundreds of them fell and died. Others lay helpless, froth upon their agonized lips and their racked bodies powerfully sick, with tearing nausea at short intervals. They too would die later, a slow and lingering death of agony unspeakable. The whole air was tainted with the acrid smell of chlorine that caught at the back of men's throats and filled their mouths with its metallic taste. So, imagine you are in a really, really dirty trench, and this cloud of death that you don't know what it is kind of floats into your immediate vicinity. It's nightmarish. And people didn't have gas masks. Gas masks were invented because of the Second Battle of Ypres. Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, PPCLI, was particularly hit. On the 8th to 13th of May, the Germans were advancing, and PPCLI stopped them short. They held it up. They held up the line. However, it came at a cost. 100 men, or I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. A 700-man force was reduced to 150 men over the course of like a few days. Anyway, Second Battle of Ypres was really bad. And as you can tell. Fortunately, George survived. He was one of the 150 men who survived. And he ends up going with his regiment. His regiment was very small at that point. All of the officers were killed. And so, Shanna, making you mod. Sorry. So all the officers all the captains and above were killed. So the commanding officer ended up becoming a lieutenant, I should say. Because everybody else was gone. However, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry showed their strength that night. And the unofficial motto of the PPCLI to this day is holding up the whole damn line, because they held everything up. They kept everything together. So their regiment moved along. There was another battle in June 1916, the Battle of Mount Sorrel. It's not a super well-known battle, not like the Somme or Verdun or anything, but there was a counterattack. It was PPCLI and it was the Germans. The Germans attacked PPCLI, and PPCLI goes for a counterattack. The counterattack ultimately fails, but George Carvell, our main character in the story, he earns the Military Cross for bravery that day. Now, the Military Cross was the second highest medal you could get for bravery in the British Empire. The only thing higher is the Victoria Cross. So I don't know exactly what he did, but he did something remarkable that day. And so that's why when I was typing his name, it's Major George Carvell, MC, Military Cross. Very few people have that medal. You get awarded that medal if you are a hero in battle. So yeah. Don't worry, we're almost done with the war stuff. It's coming to an end. Things are, and there's a surprise ending too. So, and it's a good ending. It's a surprise ending. Anyway, so they continue moving on, the regiment. George is wounded. He might have, it's most likely the effects of the gas, or the effects of the gas in the Second Battle of Ypres, or injury from the counterattack that he earned a medal in, or it could be a combination of both. So he was injured. He ends up getting married in 1916 to a lady named Ruby Eleanor Coates. So that's obviously a happy thing. He gets married. And so he has some time off, and he's able to kind of rest for a little while. And he ends up getting promoted to captain as the acting adjutant of the regiment. And let me pull up my notes on that job. So in the British Army, adjutant is usually a senior captain and sometimes a major. As the colonel's personal staff officer, he was once in charge of all the organization, administration, and discipline for a battalion or regiment. Until the 1970s, the adjutant was also the regimental operations officer. The adjutant's job is not solely a backroom one, since he usually accompanies the colonel. Normally in a British infantry battalion, the adjutant controls the battle while the CO commands it. As such, the adjutant is usually a man of significant influence within his battalion. So that's kind of his job now. He's a captain. He's rising through the ranks here. So yeah, I'm just looking at the comments. Just, yeah, stop fighting. Yeah, if you guys want to argue, do that somewhere else. But yeah, so he got promoted, everything's nice. And most likely because of his injuries, he gets seconded to the Chinese, to something called the Chinese Labor Corps, where and that was in Canada. So he moves back to Canada, and he's managing laborers, basically. He's still working in the war effort, but he's back in Canada. So he's outside the front line. He's not on the front lines anymore. He's safe. And so this is in February 1917 when he gets seconded and sent back to Canada. And so he's working on that, and it's because of that it's because he knows Mandarin that he's able to do that and communicate with some of the Chinese people. And another nice piece of the story. I know you guys like nice parts to the story. On October 14th, 1917, he has a daughter named Catherine. And so that's obviously, again, another nice thing. He's married and he has a daughter. So yeah, then plot twist. Dun, dun, dun. He becomes a spy. And he was struck off strength in the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry on April 16th, 1918. He then got promoted to major and became a spy with British intelligence. He's sent to China, where, because he knows Mandarin, so the British government sent him to China. He was in Harbin. Harbin, China. Now why Harbin particularly? Possibly because in 1917, a year before, the Russian Revolution happened, and the Bolsheviks, the communists, took control of Russia, and all of the royalists, the people who were pro-Tsar Nicholas, fled because they would get persecuted by the Bolsheviks. And a lot of the what people would call the white Russians, the people who were supportive the people who supported the Tsar, fled to Harbin, China. So it's possible that George could be in Harbin because of there's a Russian connection going on over there. I don't know all the details. Again, this is nothing that he was a spy, so it's not like we would know everything that happened. His official title was King's Messenger, basically he was in charge of transporting messages, secret messages from one place to another. It's the title King's Messenger. So that's in particularly what he did for the intelligence. So he did that from 1918 to 1923. During that time, his wife and daughter lived in Harbin with him too. So his little daughter was, so which king? King George of the UK, who was the king. I need to look up what number. Like it was like King George the something. King George. I think it's King George V. Yeah, King George V. So he was a messenger for King George V. And he was living in Harbin, China for 5 years. And yeah. And his wife and daughter lived there too. In 1923, so his health was getting worse. He was injured in the war, and yeah, his health was getting pretty bad, and things were starting to deteriorate. He returned to Canada in 1923, so after 5 years of living in Harbin, China. And the regiment, PPCLI, brought him home. Wait, wasn't China still under the emperor's rule? He was a messenger for the British king. He had nothing to do with the Chinese emperor. He was a British spy working in China. So that's what I meant by king's messenger. King messenger for the British king. Anyway, his health was deteriorating, and his regiment, PPCLI, brought him back to Canada. In the end, he died from his war wounds on December 16th, 1925. He was a major. He had earned the Military Cross. He fought in 2 wars, the Boer War and the First World War. He had a wife and a daughter, and he was gassed in the Battle of Ypres, and he died at the age of 43. He was 43 years old. Now, I told you that there would be a happy ending. And that's true. He is my great-great-grandfather. George Carvell, had descendants. His story didn't die. I am his descendant. That's the happy ending. And so I thought that this would be an appropriate time to discuss his story, considering that it's the anniversary of the Second Battle of Ypres. And if you'd like, I can show you a picture of him. Yeah, I can pull it up right now. And that's why I have all the information that I have, is because the information that I have is a collection of both records research and also oral family history. His story was passed down so his daughter, Eleanor, who was born in 1917, is my great-grandmother. She had a son, who's my grandfather. He had a daughter who was my mother. And so just earlier before this, I was on the phone with my grandfather, who's still alive, and I made sure he fact-checked all of my information to make sure that I wasn't giving you guys any incorrect information. I'm just finding the photo right now of him. I only have one photo of him. And yeah, let me see if I can. So that is George Carvell. And this is a personal, like, this is a picture that is just, it's at my grandfather's house. A lot of the information I have here is from family records. Yeah, the stash. I like the stash too. Any resemblance? I don't think there's too much of a resemblance, but anyway, that is a story. That is my story. Do you guys have any questions or comments or yeah? What did you guys think of this type of thing? Like, did you enjoy this type of, I guess, story time? Do you have any questions? Are you a princess? No, I'm not. I am absolutely not. Roller coaster ride? Yeah, that was his life. You liked it? Okay, good. I know some of you guys were getting a little bit depressed when I was talking about World War One. Yeah. And I'm sorry that it got a bit depressing in the middle of the story. Where was he buried? He was buried by the regiment. I think he was buried in British Columbia where he died. Full of the unexpected. Yeah. His life. I've spent years researching his life because ever since I was a little kid, I found him to be a particularly interesting ancestor. And yeah, when I found out new things, it was kind of crazy. I'm hoping what my family's trying to do right now is trying to figure out where are his medals. We don't know where they are. We're trying to figure that out. Yeah, if you want more, I guess, story times, yeah, comment if you thought that this mode of I don't know, virtual cadet night thing was good. And if you have any other questions, otherwise I will end as soon as things kind of get, yeah. What was the thing that was most surprising for you guys? What surprised you the most about this story? Something that shocked you or made you feel really sad or really happy? Do you have more videos? I don't know. The Boer War, yeah. A lot of people don't know about the Boer War, but you can look it up. There were quite a few Canadians who fought in it. That I'm a descendant, yeah. That was the twist at the end. How Britain needed spies in China. Yeah, I'm still not exactly sure why he was there. All I knew is, yeah, I don't know the tea per se as to why he was in China. That he speaks Mandarin, yeah. That would be so cool. Learning Mandarin, just yeah. The gas description, yeah, terrible. But that's what people felt like if you guys got a little bit uncomfortable with that description, imagine the fear that these men would have faced. Like if I'm reading it and you guys got a little bit uncomfortable, like just imagine the reality of it. It's something to reflect on 105 years later today, kind of what people did and what thank God for Geneva. Yeah, absolutely. Gas is a terrible thing, and thank goodness it's not allowed in the use of war anymore. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for participating. I hope you guys learned a few things. And I hope that this was an interesting story for you guys. I'm proud to. I never met Major George Carvell, because he died in 1925. But I think about him sometimes, and I think about his bravery and his life and all the crazy things he got up to. Anyway, thank you guys very much. Contact the seniors if you have any other suggestions for future Wednesdays, and make sure to tune in next Wednesday. We're not exactly sure what we're going to be doing, but one of the activities for sure is going to be Captain Luo's video. So make sure to tune into that and other activities that are to be determined. Thank you guys. Have a great night.